Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, our very own Zelda Trilogies. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Am I shouting? I feel like I'm shouting.
I can't really tell because we're not in the same room.
Yes.
But I did want to say congratulations on getting that last August bug in Animal Crossing.
Thank you. Yes, the giraffe stag. I did catch it after we finished recording. I went out into the living room. Sarah had not caught the bug, and she was like, "I'm sick of this. I can't do it anymore." And so I was like, "I'll take over for a while." I probably played for another hour and a half or so before catching the bug. And Animal Crossing is doing a thing, and I don't know if it has always been doing this, or if I'm only I'm only noticing it now, or if it is something that's well, you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. It's either doing something new or it's not, and I'm just dumb. That when you catch a bug for the first time, the dialogue box says yes first thing.
Oh yeah, that's not new.
That's not new. That's been happening every time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've only got 200 hours in the game.
Look, I think it's great that like you're noticing it now. That's awesome. That just means that there's that the game is continuing to reveal nice little details that were thought about.
Man, I am gonna feel the sting of that's not new.
Well, do you know what, Patrick?
So long.
I have something that I have major mea culpa for coming up, so don't feel too bad for too long.
Speaking of mea culpa, my copy of Sonic Forces, would you like to borrow it? You can, or at least you can get on a list to maybe someday borrow it. The program is good. It is active, but the list is also long. So if you want to get on that list, you can email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and give us a mailing address where we can send you my copy of Sonic Forces. You can play it for as long as you want, or not play it. You can do whatever you want with it. There are no rules when it comes to the Sonic Forces borrowing program. None whatsoever. If you wanted to eat it, pass it, clean it, and then send it back, you could do that too.
Yeah, for that one specifically, it's not a rule, but don't tell us.
Yeah, don't tell us if that's what you should do.
That's a request. It's not a rule of the program. It's just a personal request that I'm just putting out there.
Should I sterilize Sonic Forces when it comes back to me? I mean, now that I've expressed this scenario, that's one thing. But also, we're living through a global pandemic. Should I make sure that it can't carry?
I don't think
COVID-19, right?
I mean, I never say never, but I think the odds are low.
All right, good. Then I'm never going to clean this thing ever. Here's something else you can do. You can review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We like to see reviews. It's been a while since we got a lot of fresh reviews in, so we just want to make sure that we're getting all that. That's how we get moved up in algorithms and people discover us, just like you discovered us, is by being bumped up by those. Last thing. We are celebrating Mario's 35th anniversary all October long. Mark?
Yeah, all right. So I have a little explaining to do here because I had a little revelation of my own this week. Mm-hmm. I don't know how necessarily I got it. Actually, I think I do. I have been under the impression that Mario's 35th anniversary is in October. And I think the reason I've been thinking this is because that's when the NES was released for the first time in North America.
In the New York area, yeah.
Yeah. That is when there have been a lot of rumors, or at least during the summer, the rumors were that the Mario collection that is rumored to be released on Switch this fall would be coming in October.
Yep.
And so for some reason I had it in my head that Mario's 35th anniversary is in October, And while technically that might be true in North America, we don't actually have like an official release date for Super Mario Brothers in North America. It's just like anecdotally assumed that it was released when the NES was brought to the US. Mario's like 30 the 35th anniversary of the release of Super Mario Brothers is in September in Japan. So we're kind of like we're doing a Year of Luigi type thing, we're doing one of those 18-month Disneyland 60th anniversary celebrations where we're just like drawing it out a little bit. So we are celebrating in our hearts this month, and then in October we will be celebrating out loud on the podcast.
And look, I think it's totally fair. I think it's totally legit, because there is this like NES Ellis Island like situation where we don't really have all of the facts. We don't actually know what date the NES was first sold in the United States.
Its last name is because like its occupation in its home country was entertainment system.
Right. So that they just named it that and stamped the passport and let them in. And now we have a bunch of Nintendos around. Okay, so that's yes, that's the anniversary. As we are going to be celebrating it in October with a whole month of Mario programming, and we are going to close out that Mario month with our favorite Mario memories. My favorite Mario memories, Mark's favorite Mario memories, and what your favorite Mario memories. All you got to do is write into us again at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And just tell us about a time that Mario made you feel a certain way. We've been getting stories in already, and some of them are moving, some of them are funny. And I look, Mark and I only have our two experiences. We need everyone else's to get in here so we can talk about it and have a great time remembering Mario. Not that he's like died or anything. It's not a Mario memorial. Man, Mark, what are you going to do when Mario dies? That's going to be a sad day.
that is going to be a sad day. Well, hopefully he outlives us all.
Yeah, hopefully that. Or it'll be a Mr. Peanut situation, and then we'll just have Baby Mario after that.
Oh, man. But we already have Baby Mario, and I don't like him very much.
Does that mean Mario has already died?
Mario is missing.
And also, I guess... I mean, this is the time frame here is very wide, but we didn't get Baby Yoda until after Yoda died, right?
That's I guess that's true.
Yoda died in 1983. So,
well, and also like Mario's not wearing any shoes on the cover of Abbey Road, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay, Mark, enough screwing around. Let's get into our topic of the week. Let's finally curate our own Zelda trilogies. Okay, so a couple things that we need to discuss and figure out before we even get into this. And I think the first order of business is why trilogies? What do we expect of a trilogy? What are trilogies we like? Obviously, I just referenced Star Wars. I'm sure we will talk about Star Wars in some capacity here. But Mark, why are we going for trilogies here?
I feel like it just seems so for me anyways, like you mentioned like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, like those types of stuff. The Legend of Zelda feels like that sort of thing to me that when we were talking about this, like trilogies felt like such a natural fit for The Legend of Zelda, and I was kind of surprised when I actually like really like considered it that like there are no Zelda does not exist in the form of trilogies. Like, like it feels like that sort of like epic adventure that would be told for whatever reason. And, like you think of Indiana Jones, you think of like all that kind of stuff. And it's like, these are like stories and characters that exist in threes. And yet Zelda feels like it should fit there, but Nintendo's never like pursued that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like the scope is right, and the sort of like the reliance on like action is right. Also, Zelda obviously has a connection to like three, like there's the Triforce, and there's a Ganon, a Zelda, and a Link in like all of these things. Not I guess not all of them, but in most of them. So it only feels right that we should try to like arrange them in like little triptychs that will deliver a specific kind of experience. Mark, you've already mentioned a few good trilogies. Um, what are you looking for in a trilogy? Like, do you need them all to be like all to like tell a singular cohesive story? Do you need them all to take place in the same universe? Like, what do you think is going to be like your sort of guiding principle here, or what have you appreciated about other trilogies?
Yeah, it's interesting because even in the examples that we were giving, they are trilogies in different ways. Like thinking about Indiana Jones, right? Like that's very different from like a Star Wars trilogy, which does
Yeah,
tell like a single like arc. Um like Indiana Jones, yes, like and I'm only going up to Last Crusade, not, like whatever your feelings on
sure.
Crystal Skull, it feels like a different thing. Like it feels like the first three movies tell a singular kind of like idea, and then Crystal Skull is just like another thing that exists in that same universe.
Crystal Skull also very easily could have been the start of another trilogy.
Totally. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I don't know, like it's interesting to compare Indiana Jones, those first three movies, to like James Bond films where
Mm-hmm.
like Bond can continue forever, and even though there is some sort of like continuity to the character within films, they especially like within like actors portraying it, um it's designed to never end. It's like a comic book that way where, like it's designed to keep going, whereas the Indiana Jones trilogy is uh it doesn't tell a single story, but it does have that sense of like finality to the character. There is growth there.
Yeah, well, and like India or James Bond is an interesting example because I feel like there was a brief period where we did have a James Bond trilogy in Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall that felt like a single arc for that character, and like I don't know. It also like kind of falls into the way I sort of conceptualize most trilogies as the first one is just like the statement of like what the thing is, and like Star Wars is very clear with that. Indiana Jones is very clear with that, and Casino Royale is very clear with that. And then the second movie in the trilogy being a sort of like exploration or inversion of that, and like you definitely get that in Star Wars that like Empire is more of a like, well, okay, what happens when these guys are really up against the ropes? And Indiana Jones, it's like, okay, but what happens when there's like, you know, a demon cult underground and we're ripping out people's hearts? And in Quantum of Solace, it's like, okay, but what if he's driven mad by his quest for revenge? And then the last movie in the trilogy has to restore what
Mm-hmm.
is like the thematic material of the original but do it bigger, and Star Wars does that, Indiana Jones does that. I guess Skyfall doesn't so much make it bigger as it makes it more personal, which is a different kind of bigger, but it's still sort of like a back to basics, like meat and potatoes, like James Bond adventure. So for me, I think that's what I'm going to be looking for as we craft these trilogies, to start out with a clear statement, get weird, and then come back to the clear statement, but bigger.
And the other like type of trilogy that I want to mention, just because uh, I feel like depending on where we go with these games, it'll be helpful. Is I just finished reading the New York trilogy again by Paul Auster, and like those, or Auster, I actually don't know how you say his last name, but but like those are thematically similar, but in like the stories themselves, they are not similar at all. Like they don't carry characters over. They're not trying to tell the same like type of story. It is just like the themes that carry through it. And I think like that is also something that could link some of these Zelda games together.
Yeah, that's interesting, and a really good point because that is, you look at like the Cornetto trilogy, the Edgar Wright movies. So starting with Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and then what's the name of that movie?
World's
The End of
End.
the World's End. Um, that is like dealing in the same thematic material, but not the same characters, and also like a lot of the same aesthetic choices. Um, what's interesting about that is it doesn't totally do what I was talking about. But
Right.
they're also comedies, so that makes it a little bit, comedies play by their own rules anyway. Um, so that's good. I feel like we've got some good examples of trilogies out here, and some good structure to sort of like hang our hats on here. Um, We have a list of 21 Zelda games in front of us, and we will be using a random number generator to select a starting point for each of our trilogies, and then we are going to be figuring out what the rest of this trilogy should be. Mark, you brought up an interesting point before we got started.
Okay, so we have this list of 21 unique games, and we'll use a
Yes.
random number generator to pick like the genesis of that trilogy. But then as we're like naming games in that trilogy, does everything get removed from the board? So like our options become less and less the further we go. Or do we like is every game free up, to like be put into a trilogy for like every other game?
Right. Can the final episode in all of these be Breath of the Wild? Like
Right, yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's the question. I feel like so there are 21 games here,
Mhm.
right? And if we were to do a thing where we remove the game from the list, that means first of all we max out at 7 trilogies. Um, but I think that also forces us to be like disciplined about when we're using what games, right? So I think we should remove them as we use them. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, especially because there are our own rules. So if we really want to use a game twice, I think we'll allow ourselves to do it.
I mean, we'll see. I think we should. We could also maybe, if we are like, oh, you know what, the perfect second game in this trilogy should really be this one that we use somewhere else. Maybe we can pull it out if we can substitute it with something else.
I guess we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the Wild West out here. This is much like the Sonic Forces borrowing program. There are no rules except for those that we make up. So, Mark, do we need to run through the games that we're going to be pulling from here?
Yeah, so it is probably the games that you imagine in your head with maybe a couple of curveballs. So, well, yeah, why don't we run down the list?
Okay, let's go back and forth.
Starting with The Legend of Zelda,
Then Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link,
A Link to the Past,
Link's Awakening,
Ocarina of Time,
Majora's Mask,
Oracle of Ages,
Oracle of Seasons,
The Minish Cap,
Four Swords,
The Wind Waker,
The Twilight Princess,
The Phantom Hourglass,
The Spirit Tracks.
Link's Crossbow Training. Just want to point out that I actually think that those are not called The Wind Waker, The Twilight Princess, The Phantom. I think there's no article. I think it's just Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. But moving on.
I wrote the there 4 times.
Moving on, Link's Crossbow Training.
Skyward Sword,
A Link Between Worlds,
Triforce Heroes,
Breath of the Wild,
Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer.
and then Hyrule Warriors.
So that's the pool of games we are going to be drawing from. Mark, shall I select the very first game for our Zelda trilogies?
Yes, and just, in case anybody's like, why is Link's Crossbow Training in there? I will remind you that it is the 5th best-selling Zelda game of all time in North America.
Yes, and also it's a Zelda game, so it goes on there. And no, obviously, yes, we do not have any of the Philips CDI Zelda games in here. If for no other reason than Mark and I have never played any of them. Also,
Yep.
there are 3 of them, so if we rolled one, then the rest of them would just go in that trilogy. They make their own trilogy. Here we go. The random number that I am generating is number 18, which means, of course, that we are starting with The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes.
All right, well, this is a tricky one for me to start with in the sense that, like, I haven't played it.
Right. So I played this game a lot right when it came out. Triforce Heroes is a 3DS game that is multiplayer by design, like multiplayer, like limitingly multiplayer, that you really need to play it with 2 other people, either online or locally, where you just sort of take on a series of dungeons. It's got a very it's mechanics based in a way that not many other Zelda games are. Like, combat is important. How a Zelda game plays is always important. But this is about like getting high scores, about getting through dungeons fast, about getting through dungeons in ways that are efficient or good, and working together with people. It's also about fashion.
Right. Hytopia.
Yeah. You live in Hytopia, which is a world that is all of the characters care about fashion. The most popular person in the town is the designer who makes all of your clothes and costumes, and you get different like buffs and abilities based on what costume you wear into battle when you go into these sort of multiplayer arenas. And it's cool stuff. Like there's a Zora suit which like lets you swim faster. There is there's like a fire suit that lets you like throw fireballs like Mario. Actually, that may just be an item. There's a bunch of crazy costumes, and it is super fun. The game is really fun, but like restrictive in its. I mean, it's anytime they're making you do multiplayer on a 3DS, like a little bit. Like it technically works, but also like ooh, ooh, it's tough and it takes a long time. Yeah, so tricky place to start a trilogy for sure.
Well, so I feel like there's like a couple of ways we can take this, right? Like mechanically, it's fairly similar to Four Swords, and Four Swords Adventure,
Yeah,
right? So like that is an option. The other option is like, yeah, if we wanted to focus on this idea of like fashion and more like the NPCs and the setting, then we might be able to find like thematically similar other Zelda games that find that same joy in like the setting and having really like
yeah.
specific like NPCs.
Right, which I mean I think that it sounds like you're leading towards maybe Link's Awakening or possibly Majora's Mask.
Right, exactly. Like I feel like both of those are really good examples. Um we've talked in the past about like how many great Zelda NPCs there are. In fact, you can listen to our episode about the greatest Zelda NPC of all time. And not just like the NPCs of Zelda, but just like the worlds themselves. I mean, we also did an episode on like the greatest like Zelda overworld.
Oh
And
no.
but I feel like
Yeah.
like in addition to the ones that you mentioned, I feel like Wind Waker is like really in there
Yeah.
as well. Um so I do think that you could make a trilogy out of just like Zelda games that have like basically like exceptional settings and exceptional NPC characters.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I wonder though if like that is certainly a part of this game, but like the number of NPCs is pretty restrictive, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
only ever in this one town, and it is populated with a couple of interesting characters. But like, really, when I say a couple, I mean like five
Mm-hmm.
interesting characters. And like the world itself is interesting, but like it just maybe that's not quite the place to, or maybe that's not like the defining characteristic here. I think it has to be the sort of like multiplayer combat focus, like being the thing that makes it. I feel like the rest of the trilogy here, and I'm just gonna throw this out and we can decide what order it goes in. That the other two entries in the trilogy are Four Swords and Hyrule Warriors.
That makes total sense to me. Like Hyrule Warriors, as you were describing, as I was going off on, like my feelings, and then you were like, yeah, but actually this is what Triforce Heroes is like. As you were describing it, I was like, oh, to me that describes a lot of like my experience with Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah. And then you had mentioned Four Swords Adventure, or just Four Swords. I actually don't know the difference between the two.
Okay, so Four Swords was the game, the kind of like the mini game type thing that came with the Game Boy Advance version of Link to the Past. And
Okay.
then I think on the DS, or maybe it was the 3DS, they made it just like available as its own like standalone thing that you could download for free. It must have been the 3DS.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
Four Swords Adventure was the GameCube game that took that same mechanic but blew it out to like a full game.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's got to be. I think that's probably the third entry in the trilogy, and that Hyrule Warriors is the second, right?
Yeah.
Because that's Hyrule Warriors is. Look, if you've never played Hyrule Warriors, that's fine. But the story in the game is absolutely bonkers. It takes three different Zelda games. Let me see if I can. It's got the Twilight Princess universe. It's got the let's see, the Twilight Princess universe for sure. The Ocarina of Time universe. and then maybe the Skyward Sword universe, and it actually does like a crisis kind of thing where it makes these different universes, these different timelines collide in one crazy story. And then in the like deluxe version of it that came out on Switch, there's also Wind Waker and Spirit Tracks content in there too. So like it is just a big crazy mashup of a game, and like couldn't be better suited for a second entry in a trilogy. Okay, so this trilogy, Mark, do you want to come up with names for these trilogies, or is that maybe too difficult?
I think let's put the trilogies together, and then at the end,
Okay.
let's see if we find like names that are appropriate for them.
Okay, so the first trilogy here is starts with the Triforce Heroes, then moves on to Hyrule Warriors, and then closes with Four Swords Adventures. Right?
Sure, great.
Perfect. All right, now I'm going to do the random number generator again. Number 8, the Oracle of Seasons.
So this one, I think. Okay, so what's interesting about Oracle Seasons is it has like its companion Oracle of Ages game. Now,
Yeah.
I think a simple trilogy here would be Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and the Minish Cap, which are like the 3 Capcom Zelda
Yeah.
games. But if we're talking about like how, if we're going off of your kind of like founding thesis, which is this idea that like there's the first game, and then the second game that which does something very different, and then the third game which kind of like does what the first game did but a little crazier, then Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, like you can't really put those games in the same trilogy because they don't do anything that different from each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. That they and one of them isn't bigger than the other one. So like one of them can't really be the sequel to the other one. Yeah, this is kind of tricky. We could do I mean the Oracle games are fun, but they always feel like lesser versions of Game Boy Zelda. Like Link's Awakening is just such a stone cold classic. That like it's possible Link's Awakening could be the third entry in this trilogy. That
Yeah.
it's yeah.
That's what I was thinking, is that it's like, okay, do you do Oracle of Ages / Oracle of Seasons
Oh,
as like as like a single entity, and then
yeah.
like Minish Cap and Link's Awakening?
That's very interesting. Mark, do you think we can do that? Can we combine these two games into one game?
Well, let me tell you this. Do you remember anything about these games, like which one is Seasons and which one is Ages?
No,
Because
of course not.
I absolutely cannot without looking it up. So to me, it's like Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, where they've just melded into a single game in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, so we're going to start this trilogy with Oracle of Seasons / Oracle of Ages. We are combining them. Mark, we're already breaking rules, kind of. Okay, and then moving on to the Minish Cap, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the second one, which is definitely like a weirder kind of game than Oracle of Seasons and Ages, and it is also just sort of like Capcom being a little bit more comfortable with the tools of Zelda, and sort of like developing that out. And then it is interesting that like the way it moves like in time, like in order of release. And I guess it's sort of what we've done with our previous trilogy too, is that it's nowhere near release order, right? That Oracle, that the last game in this trilogy is the first one that actually comes out.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I honestly I think it's kind of a function. So maybe we should talk about, like, for these trilogies, do we have to do it in the order that it was selected? I think we do, but really, like, the trilogy itself, to me, it makes the most sense that you would start with like Link's Awakening, because that really is kind of like the thesis statement for like handheld Zelda games, and then the other
Yeah.
two are like elaborations on that.
Well, I mean, but even that is interesting because, like, as a thesis for handheld Zelda games, it's out there and wild. Like, if it appeared in anyone else's trilogy, it would be the middle chapter, right? Um, like, it would just have to be. But starting with Oracle of Seasons slash Ages, it sort of makes sense for me for it to be the end because it's sort of like the pinnacle of it for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense because, by calling it like the genesis or like the thesis of handheld Zelda, I don't know that, the Oracle games or Minish Cap I don't know that any Zelda game has really followed in that same path. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, interesting.
Like Link's
Yeah.
Awakening is such like a specific thing unto itself. It does almost feel like, you know, um like if the same developers worked on Oracle of Seasons slash Ages, then the Minish Cap, then it makes sense they'd be like, and now let's do something wacky. Like, we've done the same thing for the past couple of games. Let's do something a little bit different. And that's where Link's Awakening comes from.
Well, so in that case, do we need to put Link's Awakening in the middle of this trilogy?
The reason I say no is because I feel like Link's Awakening is like
It's too good.
it is if we're comparing. Although I guess again, which trilogies are we talking about? Because if we're talking about like the Star Wars movies, you could argue that Empire Strikes Back is the best of those three movies. If you're talking
Yeah.
about Indiana Jones, my personal opinion is that like Last Crusade is fun, but is just like playing the same notes as Raid of the Lost Ark, just a little louder. And I think Link's Awakening is not that at all.
Yeah. All right. So
I like its placement is basically what I'm coming down
you like
on.
it? You okay? Okay. Because for a second it almost sounded like you were arguing both positions at once.
I know. Well, yeah. There's Link's Awakening is a difficult one to place.
Yeah, agreed. I did myself a disservice in the way I numbered these, but that's okay. So now we've taken 7 away from this. So instead of out of 21, this is going to be out of 14. Here we go. Number 5 on the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are starting, Mark, these are some weird trilogies. We are starting with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. An odd, dark, twisted way to start. A game based in transformation and Link having to relive the same day over and over again. Do you have any strong impulses for what else is in this trilogy or what makes an interesting second beat to this?
So I have two thoughts, and it's just like a gut instinct. I don't know that I can necessarily articulate why. Um, Link Between Worlds feels like an appropriate kind of like sister game to Majora's Mask, and I think part of it is because like Ocarina of Time was so much like it is Zelda in so many people's minds,
Totally.
in the same way that like A Link to the Past is, and then Majora's Mask like took those same ideas and then like played a totally different game with it. And I feel like A Link Between Worlds kind of does the same sort of thing with A Link to the Past, where it's like great, like you had this like foundation that is like looms large in Zelda, and then so I'm going to take that and we're kind of like break it a little bit because we have this like really solid groundwork to go from. So like Link Between Worlds kind of reinvents the classic Zelda formula. You can do dungeons in any order you want. The items are all available to you as long as you're willing to pay like the rupees. And Majora's Mask is like, hey, you liked Ocarina of Time? Now, like, we're throwing in this like 72-hour time loop.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting that both of these games like don't require familiarity with the game that came before it. For Link Between Worlds being A Link to the Past, and Majora's Mask being Ocarina of Time, but like it's there, like the DNA is there. They are very much like sequels to those games. So, but as you were saying, sort of like flip them on their head. Do we have another example of that on this list?
Yes, I think
Is
it's
it Zelda
2,
2?
The Adventure of Link.
Yeah.
I do.
So, where do you think Zelda 2 is the end of this trilogy, or do you think it is
No,
the
I think it's the Temple of Doom
yeah.
of this
Yes,
trilogy
100%.
because I think it's like you man, like we loved Raiders of the Lost Ark, we loved The Legend of Zelda. Let's take that same character and like we're going through some wild stuff. Let's do a totally different take on it, and then you kind of return back to the normalcy of a more like regular Zelda game with a third one.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. Even though none of these games are like normal games, like they are
Right.
all departures, and sort of we've collected in this trilogy. It is a trilogy of sequels, which man is just the sort of look. This is the sequels trilogy, not the sequels trilogy, but the sequels trilogy. I'm naming it. We're calling it the sequels trilogy. All right, Mark. Are you ready to craft our next?
Oh wait,
Um,
that's interesting. I don't really know. It's interesting that it did work out to be sequels, even though that wasn't like the initial idea behind grouping them. It,
yeah.
but like they did all end up being like, oh, there was like some like big like game, and now we're going to follow. We have to follow up with it. It's almost like the Little Brothers one as well, where it's like there's this like my big brother is this like game that looms large in everybody's minds, and so
Yeah.
like how do I follow it up?
Yeah, and again, like I think it's so cool that this is the sort of thing that only really happens at Nintendo, right? Where like here are sequels to Ocarina of Time, The Legend of Zelda, and A Link to the Past. Like some huge games, and then they make sequels that are such radical departures that like that's just not what most video game developers and video game publishers do.
It
Like
makes me so
it takes a
excited.
Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me so excited to see what Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be
Oh
like.
yeah. Oh yeah. All right. So we now have 11 games left. Selecting between 1 and 11. The new number is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are starting. We're getting the weirdest starting places. We are starting with The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. Famously a game that Mark despises.
It's true. I really did not like in this game. Um okay, so for me, this is going look, it's another one where you could say like Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass because they're all kind of
Right.
in the same group. But what about Spirit Tracks, Link's Crossbow Training, and Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer?
Sure. Now, is this just a cast off
No, 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 no. It's not at all.
category? Okay.
So this is the reason why I'm proposing this grouping. Is because one of the things that Spirit Tracks does that is very different from I think pretty much any other Zelda game is when you're exploring the overworld, you're literally on rails. You're on a train. So, like you're on a track and you can like travel along those pre-dictated paths. Um Link's crossbow training is, kind of like is an on-rails shooter essentially. And so it
Yeah.
also like you're in the overworld, but you're on a predefined path. And then Cadence of Hyrule, it's not a predefined path, but I think you can only move in like the cardinal directions, and you are a little bit limited in the sense that like enemies are also moving in those cardinal directions, and so you have to choose your path very carefully. So it's more
Yeah,
like
it
a
is. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
It's not exploration based. None of these games are, right? That all these games are sort of course based. Spirit Tracks, Crossbow Training, and Cadence of Hyrule. Yeah, that there's obviously there's always going to be like some element of discovery in playing like any video game, but like that seems like such a core part of every other Zelda game except for these three. So and maybe Hyrule Warriors also falls into that same sort of like not discovery focused. But no, I think that's a good grouping. Do you have a rationale for why crossbow training is the second one?
Oh, I hadn't thought about the order. Those were just the three games that I think should be
Oh,
grouped
okay.
together.
So I think that is right though, because crossbow training is such a that it is so focused on like a single idea. that like it is such a radical departure. Like Cadence of Hyrule still looks like a Zelda game in the same way that like Spirit Tracks still looks like a Zelda game, even though like some of your main like traversal mechanics have been totally altered.
Well, I would actually, I would say maybe Cadence of Hyrule should be the second one. Because again, going by this like
Mm,
Temple of Doom type thing, like it is so significantly different from
interesting.
like the other two games where it's like, yeah, like crossbow training for sure is, like a radical departure in gameplay or presentation from other Zelda games, but it is strongly in the world of Twilight Princess.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you know what's interesting about crossbow training that I'm really just realizing now is how similar it is in gameplay to the parts of um, Spirit Tracks where you are like driving around on this train and like you're just shooting stuff with the cannon. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very similar in that regard. So maybe that's how like Link's crossbow training is the finale to this trilogy of like sort of pointing and shooting, with Cadence of Hyrule being like the little bit of a departure. Maybe picking up on the cue of that great piece of music from Spirit Tracks. Remember how good
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Spirit
like
Tracks
the
music
main
is?
theme is so good.
One of the best pieces of Nintendo music. Right? It was in our tournament. I'm sure
It,
we talked about it.
it was, yeah, the like the Smash Brothers remix was in
That's
our
right. That's
tournament.
right. All right, that is a good trilogy. Let's just restate it. Mark, do you have it up right now?
Yeah, it's the Spirit Tracks, Crypt of the Necrodancer, and Link's crossbow training.
So now we have but 8 games remaining. So I think we're gonna be able to make 2 more trilogies out of this. I gotta say, we've cut a lot of fat in these. Not that
We
every
really
game we've
did.
talked about is a bad game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's kind of just core Zelda experiences left here. So let's see what we got. So this trilogy starts with the Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. Mark, what a place to start.
So
What a
this
place to
one,
start.
Ocarina of Time, and I feel like it's uh oh what uh why am I blanking on the third Indiana Jones
At
movie's name? Oh,
Last Crusade.
yeah, it's Last Crusade to me is clearly Twilight Princess, where they were like, let's do Ocarina of Time, but we've done this before, so like let's really
Yeah.
crank it up.
I mean, I think that is right. I think there's a possibility that you could make an argument for Skyward Sword, but I'm not going to make that argument. I don't know that game really well enough. But Twilight Princess for sure is just Ocarina of Time, but like bigger.
And I wonder if like if Wind Waker would be the second game in
It
this
feels
trilogy.
right, doesn't it?
And I'm thinking of like, like okay, you had Ocarina of Time, then you had Majora's Mask, which people like, but it was like, oh my gosh, like on the GameCube, what is Zelda going to look like? We're gonna get like a super hyper realistic Zelda, and then like we get this curveball, we get Temple of Doom, a movie that like a game that its esteem has grown with time, but not
Sure.
everybody loves. And then you have Twilight Princess where they're like, okay, now we're gonna like seemingly give people what they want.
Well, and also like Wind Waker, for all of its cutesiness, has that second entry in a trilogy darkness to it, right? Um, the game famously ends with this isn't really a spoiler for it.
Not
It,
yeah.
it is, but like who cares? It's like a superficial spoiler for a 20-year-old game. With Link stabbing Ganon like through the head with the
Yeah.
Master Sword.
Yeah, it gets away with it because it is like cutesy looking, like because it has
Yeah.
that kind of like chibi, like cute art style. It can get away with all that like really dark stuff.
Yeah. Well, and also like just when you like conceive of Wind Waker's universe, that it is the Hyrule that you've played in other games that's just been like flooded, like that. Towns. The Hyrule Castle is underwater, right? Like the old kingdom has been destroyed by a massive flood. So like. Yeah, I think that is a perfect logical trilogy. It was so logical, I almost didn't want to propose it when you were like, "I think this is it." This is sort of I almost want to call this like the meat and potatoes trilogy, right? That this is the Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess. What a good one. How many does that leave us with? Five games. 5 games, Mark. Are you ready for our next random number?
Yes.
The random number generated is 5. So we are starting with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So
So
I think the end of this trilogy is the original Legend of Zelda. I know it's not doing the thesis statement of Breath of the Wild, but bigger, but it has, in the same way that Breath of the Wild does, a sort of like go and figure it out sort of of mantra. The rest of the games, so the other games that we still have left to choose from, just for reference sake, are Link to the Past, Phantom Hourglass, and Skyward Sword, and those are all pretty guided experiences, right? They all have open worlds, but like, you explore them in like an order.
so here I agree with you that like Breath of the Wild and then The Legend of Zelda, and I'm going to throw Skyward Sword as the third game. And this is a different kind of trilogy, but this is where I'm going in my mind. Is
Okay, yeah,
that
bring it up.
did you ever read the Chronicles of Narnia? Are you familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia?
I am familiar. Yes, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I've read. I think like most people, I read Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was like, oh, okay, I shouldn't have started here. I should have started with Prince Caspian. Is that right?
No,
Voyage
I
of the
think
Dawn Treader.
no, I think you should have. Well, okay, so this is what I was gonna say is that Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe is the one that
Yes.
like everybody's familiar with, right? Because it's
Yeah.
uh there was like cartoon, like it's just like the most well known one.
Yeah.
And then later, right, C.S. Lewis like wrote a book called The Magician's Nephew that is set before
Magician's nephew.
the that is set before The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But it's like a prequel in the same way that like the Star Wars prequels are prequels, where it's like I guess it's first, but it actually makes sense if you don't read it first. And
Mm-hmm.
then my experience with the Narnia books are that like I just lost interest, and I haven't read
Yes.
I haven't read like most of them. And so that is why I'm proposing uh Breath of the Wild is first, like The Magician's Nephew, where you're like, yeah, totally, you can absolutely enjoy this book. It's on its own, but like there are aspects of it that make more sense if you play it later. And then you have The Legend of Zelda, which is a game that I think like probably everybody is familiar with on some level, just because like if nothing else, the sprite art for Link from The Legend of Zelda is so iconic, like that initial overworld. And then you have
Yeah.
Skyward Sword, a game I haven't played.
Which just represents the rest of the Narnia series.
Exactly.
Hold on, I want to figure this out. So, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is, of course, published first, like you say, and is the place where you should start. Then it's, well, okay, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, The Magician's Nephew, and The Last Battle, published in that order, but reading order is something along those lines. It's too confusing. We're never going to work it out. And I think that sort of lends credence to your order here, in that we are never going to figure out where Breath of the Wild fits in the timeline. So we may as well put Skyward Sword, which is supposed to be like one of the earliest entries, last in this timeline.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay, perfect. So that this is maybe I don't know, is this a cop-out trilogy?
No, it's the Narnia trilogy. It's Mark's
It's the
experience with the
Narnia.
Narnia. It's Mark's experience with
I love it.
Narnia trilogy.
So that means that the 2 games that we did not get to place in trilogies are The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass, which hurts me a little bit because I like those games a lot.
Yeah.
What can we do here? What can we do here?
Like, okay, let's taking these two games, if we were to
Yeah.
pull any third game from any of the ones that are off the board, like, what do you think links A Link to the Past and the Phantom Hourglass in any order? Like, Phantom Hourglass could go first, Link to the Past could be first. They're like the first games on
Yeah.
the hardware, right? Like on a very like
Right.
superficial level.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that there's much else that makes them similar. It bugs me a little bit to have Phantom Hourglass separate from Wind Waker, but I think we have such a specific role for Wind Waker. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that a good or at least like compelling trilogy could be A Link to the Past, Phantom Hourglass, and then Link Between Worlds. Because Link Between Worlds is a good, like, obviously sequel to A Link to the Past, and Phantom Hourglass, like, takes the idea of Zelda and sort of like subverts her, and then that is like re-subverted in Link Between Worlds.
Oh,
Like
I
that
like that.
maybe
Yeah.
that's maybe better than. So where did we have Link Between Worlds?
We have it
Or
in the
yeah,
sequel trilogy right now.
Oh, which is a trilogy that I do like.
Well, I don't know that we have to like break up one trilogy to form another.
Oh, okay. So we're just saying Link
Because
Between Worlds is doing double duty.
I think potentially.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
I mean, is there
so
a way
this-
to have it like echo where you're like, okay, so it goes Majora's Mask, Zelda 2, A Link Between Worlds, then it goes
Sure, machete order.
right, then it goes the Phantom Hourglass, and then A Link to the Past. So it's like
Oh, it's like poetry. It rhymes.
yes, exactly.
Well, no, I think there's something interesting to like two trilogies that have the same endpoint, right? And part of the thing that we're playing with in the sequels trilogy is the idea that they are sequels anyway. So that could also be an Ocarina Zelda 1. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. What I'm describing right now does not work at all.
But I do like what you're saying. It's like almost like Link Between Worlds in some ways, like a peak, and you have like two different ways to scale that peak, but like the core of it remains the same.
Yeah, a high rule side and a low rule side. So it fits perfectly into the game's like duality as it is. So Mark, this is great. We have created now 6 game trilogies. I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've created 7 of these. So the very first one that we created is this Triforce Heroes, Hyrule Warriors, and Four Swords Adventure. So that's sort of like the Arena trilogy, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, that's what we're calling it, the Arena trilogy. Next is the Oracle of Ages / Seasons. 2 games. Start this one. And then the Minish Cap, and then Link's Awakening. Do we have a name for that one?
I mean, it is the handheld trilogy.
Yeah, I think handheld is correct. All right, and then the next one is the sequels trilogy, which goes Majora's Mask, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, and then closing out with A Link Between Worlds. And then we have the Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. This is a new trilogy. Spirit Tracks, Crypt of the Necrodancer, and Link's Crossbow Training. What's the name of this trilogy?
It's all about like movement. It's all about like
All about like paths.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the path. You want to call it the Pathfinder trilogy?
Yes, I do.
I don't know what
want
the
to.
finder part is. All right, the Pathfinder trilogy, and then we have what I am tentatively going to just call the Meat and Potatoes trilogy, which goes Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess, or like classic trilogy, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's the Indiana Jones trilogy in Zelda form, but yes.
Let's call it the Heroes trilogy.
Yes. For copyright reasons.
Yes, that's right. And then our oh no, I guess we have one more after this. But this trilogy that starts with Breath of the Wild, then goes to The Legend of Zelda, and then closes out with Skyward Sword, which is Mark's experience of the Chronicles of Narnia trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
And the final trilogy, of course, being this sort of genuine Zelda trilogy, one that is focused around perverting and changing the idea of Zelda as a character, goes A Link to the Past, The Phantom Hourglass, wherein she's a ghost. I don't know if we touched on why it's so different. Zelda is dead in Phantom Hourglass, and she follows you around as a ghost. It's wild. And then closing out with Link Between Worlds, again for a second time, which is totally fine, and we're not cheating because the game has a light and dark component. It totally works. Mark, which one of these trilogies is your favorite? Which one would you want to play?
I would want to play the sequels trilogy, except I don't want to play Zelda 2. I think the one that is like, I think it's A Link to the Past, Phantom Hourglass, and A Link Between Worlds.
Yeah, no, that's mine too. Like the genuine Zelda trilogy, also feels like the most fun to me. And part of that is because Link to the Past is one of my favorite games of all time. But Phantom Hourglass is a game that I never finished, but I always really liked.
I really like Phantom Hourglass.
I like that pirate captain guy, Linnebeck. Got it, or Linebeck. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. All right, Mark, let's close this out. Okay, those are our Zelda trilogies, but do you have Zelda trilogies that come to your mind, to your brain, that make sense as like a triptych of games? Mark, I made a very small list of Zelda-like games. If we needed to like insert, Darksiders or 3D Dot Game Heroes or Okami or Oceanhorn or Blossom Tales into any of these, but we didn't need it. I think we were good without them. But if people put trilogies together with non-Zelda games in them, sure, that's great. Email them to us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. All right, Mark, let's close this out. That is this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like the episode, you can share it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share stuff. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell. And the show is at Nincart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.
I'm Kate Thompson.
And I'm Mark David Christensen. And together we host Crap, a Hellboy podcast.
The show dedicated to the half-demon hero brought forth by writer-artist Mike Mignola and published by Dark Horse Comics.
Each week we discuss everything Hellboy.
Plus his expanded universe with the BPRD, Abe Sapien, Lobster Johnson, and many more.
That's Crap, a Hellboy podcast on Campfire Media or wherever you get your podcasts.
Campfire.